Did you feel that he was a threat still? Or did you feel
not at all.
that he could be trusted at that point?
Not at all.
Did you ever worry that the treatment didn't work, especially with so many young children in the house?
No. Josh was a changed person.
We're following breaking news this afternoon. The verdict is in. A federal jury finds Josh Duggar guilty of downloading and possessing child porn.
Over the last decade, the channel TLC has made a startling amount of predators, abusers, criminals, and scammers rich and famous. In today's video, we're going to be discussing how TLC has placed some truly terrible people at the center of its shows and the network as a whole. We'll also be discussing how TLC has profited off the pain, suffering, neglect, and abuse of children, women, families, and even their own viewers. The video will be broken down into sections covering some of the biggest shows. We won't be covering absolutely every single show, but trying to cover as many as possible. The criminals platformed by TLC have showcased abuse, neglect, manipulation, and the poor treatment of children and spouses. TLC uses these shows to hook audiences and then promotes and monetizes the poor treatment of children and spouses. This video, of course, will not be monetized because it would be pretty hypocritical of me to call TLC out for this and then sit on here and do the same thing. So if you do see ads on here, it is either TLC copyright claiming me, someone else copyright claiming me from any of the interviews I'm going to show you, or it's Google or YouTube themselves. This video is going to be going over some pretty serious topics, so if that's not something you can handle, please X off. It's not a big deal. We'll catch you next video. This video will cover the Duggars, the Willis Family, Little People Big World, Here Comes Honey Boo Boo, 90 Day Fiance, Welcome to Plathville, and some other shows. We're going to start out by talking about the most famous family to come out of TLC, and also one of the biggest criminals, and that's of course the Duggars and their eldest son, Josh Duggar. In September 2008, a show called 17 Kids and Counting started airing on TLC. There'd been previous iterations of the show in the forms of specials, and over the next few years, the Duggars had 2 more children, so the show became 18 Kids and Counting and then 19 Kids and Counting. The show is about Michelle and Jim Bob Duggar and their 19 children, whose names all begin with the letter J. The Duggars are devout Baptists and they're a quiverful family. A quiverful family means that you leave your family size up to God, and they don't believe in any form of birth control, and they kind of value purity in women above all else. It's very male hierarchy and subservient roles for women. The women are not really educated at all either, and because these families have a really big family, because not having birth control, of course you have a big family, and also the fact that it's only the man that goes out to work because the woman has to stay home and raise all the children because she's subservient to the man. These sort of situations create poor families because big size, one income, of course. And a lot of these quiverful families also don't get any government support. They don't believe in it. So you have really, really poor families. And the Duggars actually were really poor before TLC came along. They lived in like a 3-bedroom house, and the older Duggar children have spoken a lot about their kind of food insecurity and having to constantly fight for resources. After 19 Kids and Counting started, the Duggars obviously got fame, money, and notoriety. And even though at one stage the whole family was appearing on the show, the only person to get a check was Jim Bob. And this has been spoken about by the spouses of the adult Duggar children. While the show was airing, it was very usual stuff. Family activities, holidays, weddings, births, and viewers of the show seemed to be fascinated with the odd lifestyle of the Duggars. The Duggars seem to take everything to the extreme. girls were not allowed to wear pants and boys were only allowed to wear pants. Even when playing sports or exercising, they were not allowed to wear shorts. The kids were not allowed to hug or to be one-on-one with members of the opposite sex. Even when children were older, in their late teens, they were not allowed to be alone with members of the opposite sex. The Duggars were extremely controlling and strictly chaperoned their children's courtships. So the Duggars don't date like normal people. They have these courtships where they're basically matched, or someone asks their parents if they can court one of the daughters, and when they start courting, they barely know each other, and by the end of the courtship, which is only a few months, they barely know each other as well, because they're never allowed to speak or be like alone together. Everything is really strictly controlled by Jim Bob and Michelle. The Duggars were also very, very obsessed with their children's romantic relationships and sex lives.
Definition of normal children.
The Duggars were open about their hatred of the LGBTQ community and were extremely homophobic and transphobic. They claimed that members of the LGBTQ community were predatory, which is ironic because predatory was exactly what their eldest son, Josh, was.
How could you unfairly, in their view, compare transgendered people to child molesters, suggest they are child molesters, knowing what you know about Josh?
I think that protecting young girls and not allowing young men and men in general to go into a girl's locker room is just common sense.
But this is different because you injected child molestation into it.
I think you actually said pedophile in that, and actually a pedophile is an adult that preys on children. Joshua was actually 14 and just turned 15 when he did what he did. And I think the legal definition is 16 and up for being an adult preying on a child. So he was a child preying on a child.
You do not view Josh as a pedophile?
No.
Josh Duggar was the eldest of the 19 children, and many viewers stated that he was the favorite and golden child of the family.
Really, I think quite clearly what we've seen, whether it's Hobby Lobby or now Priest for Life, this administration is set on trampling and running roughshod on those who hold deeply held religious beliefs. On
May 21st, 2015, at the height of the show's popularity, a police report from 2006 was revealed to the public by In Touch magazine, stating that Josh Duggar, who was 14 or 15 at the time, had abused 5 girls, 4 of which were his own sisters. Josh had touched the girls on many occasions when they were both sleeping and awake. The next day, TLC pulled all reruns from its schedule.
Big news coming out of the cross-section of the conservative culture wars and reality TV.
Tonight, TLC pulling its hit show 19 and Counting about the supposedly wholesome Duggar family off the air.
On the show 19 Kids and Counting, Josh Duggar and his family are portrayed as a picture of wholesome perfection.
Hypocrisy is so real with this family. How dare they shame the LGBT community? How dare they condemn them for their immoral lifestyle when the Duggars are the immoral ones? I say screw you, Jim Bob and Michelle, screw you.
So why would a family with such a painful secret launch a reality TV show? And was it hypocritical to preach family values, knowing of their own son's repeated sins?
Josh's crime happened before the series, and TLC allegedly didn't know about the events. Once the news hit the public, over 20 advertisers pulled out from TLC and the Duggars. This included big companies like General Mills, Crayola, Walgreens, and Pizza Hut. Hulu also removed the show from its show catalog, and only after advertisers pulled out did TLC cancel the show in July 2015. At the time of the show's cancellation, the Duggars were paid an estimated $35,000 to $45,000 per episode, and with a 22-episode season, that was coming in just shy of $1 million a year. But on top of that, they had speaking engagements, other branding deals, endorsements, and branding experts estimated that the Duggars were pulling in an estimated $25 million a year, all from the platform that TLC gave them. So when In Touch magazine released a police report, just prior to that, the Duggars were supposed to go on the Oprah show, and when the team were preparing for the interview, someone sent them an anonymous police report and the interview never happened. When the police report was made public and all of the details about Josh abusing his sisters came out, Jim Bob and Michelle went on the offensive. They went and did a bunch of media interviews trying to defend Josh and saying that, this happened when he was a teenager. He was just curious about girls and he had gotten over it. It was a blip.
We've got to send him out of the home. He has got to go and seek counsel and get help.
Josh was sent for live-in therapy at a Christian-based treatment center. Michelle Duggar wept as she told how she explained his absence to their other kids.
And for days and days, I was saying, Josh has done some very bad things. And he's very sorry.
And they also paraded the daughters out, his victims, and got them to say similar things.
Confirming they were molested by their brother when they were youngsters. They say they've been victimized again by being publicly dragged into the scandal.
A system that was set up to protect kids, both those who make stupid mistakes or have problems like this in their life and the ones that are affected by those choices. It's greatly failed.
And Jim Bob also was saying that Josh wasn't a pedophile because, of course, he was a child preying on other children, which some of the things they say are just unbelievable.
What I'm asking you is, can you understand the critics' reaction to this news?
I can understand that, but I think I know that every one of us have done things wrong. That's why Jesus came.
And they were saying this is just a blip, but this was the first of many, many scandals and crimes that Josh Duggar committed. When this all started coming out, Josh was already married to his wife, Anna Duggar, and they already had several children. 3 months later, Josh was in another scandal, and his data was leaked when there was a hack at the site Ashley Madison. And Ashley Madison is a site where you go to have an affair, and Josh had paid for the guaranteed affair package. So all of this came out, and he was, talking about how he's such, a religious person and so wonderful and so wholesome and family-centered. And in reality, he was cheating on his wife. A few months later, in November 2015, an adult entertainer, Danica Dillon, sued Josh after he paid for $600 worth of lap dances, went back to her hotel room and assaulted her. Minor things here and there popped up over the course of the next few years, but the biggest incident with Josh started in November 2019. The Duggars car lot that Josh worked at was raided by the FBI. And at the time, no one knew why. There was a lot of rumors circulating, but nothing really came of it at the time.
Yesterday, KNWA reported that HSI was present at the Duggar house in Taneytown in connection to a federal investigation. Today, HSI spokesperson Brian Cox amended his statement, saying instead that the agency was in Springdale investigating a business.
I guess what is the scope is what I've been trying to say. Like, is there something going on my devices where that's been something's accessed or something's downloaded or uploaded or something like that?
That's what led us here. Yes. Okay. So what we're trying to do is hopefully find out exactly what happened so we can try to use that information to put some pieces of the puzzle together to help save.
Does it include, so did it mark this IP address? Is that basically what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
witness.
But all was made clear in April 2021 when Josh Duggar was arrested. Josh was arrested for possessing and receiving explicit child images.
A certain IP address that was participating in the uploading and sharing of known videos and images of child pornography.
Okay.
That information was then sent to us because the IP geolocated back into the Western District, somewhere in Northwest Arkansas.
So it was transmitting or receiving?
At this point, probably best that you just listen, okay?
Okay.
We were able to get from this IP address one specific video of child pornography and one folder containing approximately 65 images of child pornography from a specific IP address. We then, once that information was turned over to us, because of the fact that it was geolocated in Northwest Arkansas, we served a federal summons for that IP address. That IP address came back to Ozarks Go with a subscriber of Joshua Duggar with cell phone. I'm assuming that's personal cell phone. With that email address that you just mentioned.
I'm not going to go into a ton of details about his trial and his crime. If you want to see a lot of detail about that, I really recommend the channel Fundie Fridays. They do a really good job of covering everything with the Duggars and with Josh's trial. So definitely check them out. Josh was arrested, as I said, in April 2021, and he actually got out on bail. He wasn't allowed to stay at his home with his wife and kids, thankfully, but he had to go and stay with friends of Jim, Bob, and Michelle, and he went to trial at the end of 2021. There was a lot of discussion when he was on trial about the software that he had on his phone to try and keep him in line. It was a software called Covenant Eyes, which is basically an accountability software. So it's installed into the device, and if you look up, something you're not supposed to be looking up, then the phone will ping your accountability buddy, which was his wife, Anna. And Josh is quite technical and good with computers. So he had actually downloaded a Linux partition, which is basically where you're separating your computer. And imagine your computer's in a bubble here. And so the Covenant Eyes software is working in the bubble. But then there's another part that's separated. And he can do whatever he wants over here because the Covenant Eyes isn't working in this part. And that is when he was able to access the dark web and access these explicit images. Some of the FBI that testified in this trial, who it's their job to categorize and catalog the images collected, they normally categorize these things between 1 and 5, and 5 is the worst. And there was people that they'd done this for 20 years, and they said some of these images were the worst that they'd ever seen, and there was 4 and 5s in the images that Josh had.
And I don't want to be, I've watched my friends, answer things, and they get them for conspiracy or for something, and I'm not, I know federal statutes are broad and there's a lot of things to it, and I'm not going to say anything that's going to
we don't
incriminate me or anything at all. I don't want to, I'm not I'm not denying guilt, and I'm not saying that I'm, as far as anything goes, I don't want to say the wrong thing.
On December 9th, 2021, a jury found Josh Duggar guilty of receiving and possessing child explicit images. He faced up to 20 years in federal prison and a fine of up to $250,000. On December 9th, 2021, the jury found Josh Duggar guilty.
The jury began deliberating at 8:30 this morning and came back with a guilty verdict at 10. They found Josh Duggar guilty of possessing and downloading child pornography, and then he was taken into custody. Here is Josh Duggar's latest mugshot as he was booked into the Washington County Jail earlier today. And here is a surveillance video from inside the jail as he was booked. Duggar could face up to 20 years in federal prison, and his sentencing will not be for another 4 months. And take a look at this video of Duggar's wife, Anna, Jim Bob, and other family members walking out of the courthouse today. No one said anything. They just walked to an SUV and drove away.
On May 25th, 2022, he was sentenced to 151 months, which is about 12 and a half years in prison, 20 years of probation with special circumstances, which means things like he can't use the internet, he can't possess or ingest marijuana or controlled substances, he can't be alone with any minors, and he also was given over $50,000 in fines. So moving from one TLC platformed monster to another, I'm next going to talk about the Willis family. And the Willis family were a wholesome, musically talented family that appeared on America's Got Talent.
Opposite of my family, which were known around town as the Munsters. You've never seen anyone like me where you're from, have you?
Come on, wave to Uncle Howie.
And they were given a show on TLC. All of the kids were sweet and really good with playing instruments and singing, so people were really entertained by them. They seemed like a wholesome, musically talented American family, but in reality, the father, Toby Willis, was abusing and R-wording his own daughters.
The family was hit with shocking news. The patriarch of the Willis group, Toby, was arrested and charged with raping a minor female.
Just as the group was poised to perform in front of a live audience in Kentucky, 46-year-old Toby Willis was arrested. He was charged with child rape dating back 15 years. Overnight, all public appearances were canceled. Mom Brenda and the 12 kids withdrew from the public eye. The horrific stories of rape first came to light when their oldest sister, Jessica, told her story to a family counselor who reported the abuse to police.
The first time I was able to tell my story was after one of my sisters told her story.
Looking back, the older girls now wish they'd been able to speak up before their father had a chance to prey on their younger sisters.
The truth is, all of us at different times could have, spoken up and said, this is my truth, this is what, I'm experiencing.
The boys feel guilt, wishing they'd known.
Thankfully, this monster is also locked away, and he was given 40 years. Little People, Big World was another popular show on TLC. It was about the Roloff family, parents Amy and Matt, and their 4 children. Another show that seemed to be a wholesome family show, but TLC themselves were the people who brought a predator into the Roloff's family. Jacob Roloff, one of the sons featured on the show, spoke out about how one of the series producers abused him while filming the show.
News that when he was a child, the executive field producer of Little People, Big World, Chris Cartman, had taken advantage of him. It was absolutely heartbreaking to hear as a fan of the show, and according to Matt, the family was just as devastated and had absolutely no idea that anything had happened until Jacob told them all just before he made the announcement public. But what most people don't know is the bizarre backstory of Chris Cartman and his time on Little People Big World. Even though Jacob just made the announcement in 2020, super fans of the show knew that Chris had had a weird and twisted past with both the family and the show for years before that. Chris joined Little People Big World as the executive field producer in 2007. And just 1 year later, on October 20th, 2008, he was actually arrested in Santa Clara, California for crimes against children. The Sun spoke with a public information officer who clarified the situation, saying, quote, "The suspect, Christopher Cartman, was ultimately arrested and booked into the main jail in San Jose for acts with a minor. He was held on $200,000 bond and was released on November 12, 2008, less than a month later."
You would think that when a show like this, where there's 6 cast members and 4 of them are minors, is getting extensive background checks and looking into who's going to be working on the show. And you'd think that would be going on with all of the TLC shows because they nearly all contain children, but they didn't obviously do anything of the sort. Here Comes Honey Boo Boo was another very popular show on TLC, and it was about Alana, who had a nickname Honey Boo Boo. She actually appeared on another TLC show, Toddlers and Tiaras, and that's also where she got her nickname from. And she got her own spin-off that featured her family and what they got up to in their home state of Georgia.
Hello?
Hello.
I got a big surprise for y'all.
Whoopee. Yay. We're going to Six Flags. No, we're not. I swear. Mama just texted and said, we're going to Six Flags this weekend.
On October 24th, 2014, TLC cancelled the series after 4 seasons. This was due to the fact that Alana's mother, Mama June, was seen with Mark McDaniel, a man who served 10 years in prison after being convicted of aggravated child molestation in 2004 and who was a registered sex offender. This prompted June to admit to Entertainment Tonight that the father of her other daughter, Pumpkin, was not McDaniel as previously stated, but Michael Ford, another convicted sex offender who served time for sexual exploitation of minors after being caught on To Catch a Predator in 2005. Next, I'm going to talk about 90 Day Fiance and all of its iterations. I will say that I'm only going to talk about one person from 90 Day. There is an absolute plethora of people on 90 Day who are so problematic, and I am considering doing just a 90 Day Fiance problematic people video. So if that's something you'd be interested in, let me know below in the comments, because when I started looking at all of just the criminal history with people on 90 Day, it's so long. And then there's also in that show and most of the other TLC shows situations where it's not necessarily criminal, but it's just abusive and gross, and should this really be on TV for people to see? And should these people be given huge platforms, money, social media, fame, and profiting from all of that? Like Big Ed, hello, should he really be given a platform? And tons of other people. I mean, Larissa, Paul, John, the list is absolutely endless of all these people who've done these heinous things and should not be given platforms to profit from. So I'm going to talk specifically about Geoffrey Paschel, because he is an awful human being, but also what TLC did was awful with him. And it's just even more showing that all they care about is profit. They don't care about even their own cast members or their viewers. I'm not surprised about the viewers, but at least you'd think that they'd try and protect their own cast members, because Geoffrey Paschel was on the spin-off of 90 Day before the 90 Days, and he was going from Tennessee to Russia to meet his girlfriend Varia for the first time. And when he was on the show, he had already committed his crime. He just hadn't gone to trial for it yet. So when viewers found out about him committing this crime, viewers were the one who spoke up about it and said, this guy should not be on the show. And they did remove him from parts of the show, so he didn't appear in the tell-all, and he also didn't appear on the segments for Pillow Talk, which Pillow Talk is where previous cast members from 90 Day watch the current 90 Day and like comment on it. It's like Gogglebox for anyone who lives in the UK. But this took viewers to say something. Like, TLC only ever responds when there's backlash or advertisers start pulling out.
I'm ever gonna get over this. I don't know how I'm gonna move past this.
90 Day Fiance star Geoffrey Paschel sentenced to 18 years in prison without the possibility of parole after being convicted of kidnapping and assaulting his ex-fiance.
The next thing I remember, he was beating me.
The sentencing comes after a jury found the 44-year-old guilty of aggravated kidnapping, domestic assault, and interference with emergency calls in October.
So Geoffrey Paschel was finally put on trial for the charges, and on October 7th, he was found guilty of all of the charges: aggravated kidnapping, domestic violence, and interference with an emergency call. All of this was at his criminal trial in Tennessee, and a judge immediately revoked his bail and took him into custody, where he will remain for 18 years.
Instead of taking a plea deal for something he obviously did, Geoffrey Paschel instead chose to go before a jury and was found guilty on all charges that he was tried.
The defendant, Geoffrey Paschel, guilty of aggravated kidnapping.
And as to count 2, how does the jury find?
We, the jury, find the defendant, Geoffrey Paschel, guilty of domestic violence.
And as to count 3, how does the jury find?
We, the jury, find the defendant, Geoffrey Paschel, guilty of interference with emergency call.
Thank you. Please be seated, everyone. If you please pass those verdict forms to the court officer.
Geoffrey Paschel was found guilty of aggravated kidnapping, domestic assault, and interference with an emergency call. He is probably going to be going to prison for about 12 years. That is what people are speculating.
So those are the majority of the worst people that TLC has given a platform to, given money and fame to. There's so much other stuff going on that's problematic on TLC. I mean, there's this whole culture towards the children, like on Plathville, Sister Wives, the Duggars, all of that, that these kids are being used and abused on these shows for entertainment. They don't follow any sort of like child performer guidelines. It's kind of like those family vloggers where the parents are profiting from all of this. There's going to be nothing left for the kids, and they don't have to adhere to any sort of child labor laws. They can just do whatever the hell they want. But there's also so many other aspects, like how all these 90-day fiance and sister wives people, when they get these social media platforms, they use it and abuse it to get people into MLMs like that Diarrhea Tea and Plexus and fucking LuLaRoe and all those other things that just are absolute wastes of money, but it gets them money and profit, because normally like a normal person has a network of like 200-300 people, maybe a little bit more if you're sending hey hun emails to people you went to high school with. But these people have these huge networks on their social media, so they're going to be able to recruit all these people into their downline. So between the kids thing and the MLM thing, there's so much more to discuss on TLC, and if that's something you'd be interested in, let me know in the comments and I can do a video on either of those or both of those. The 90-day fiance video too I could do. And there's another side to it too, of all these vulnerable people who are being put in these situations, like on My 600-Pound Life and Dr. Pimple Popper and stuff like that. Like, should we really be taking advantage of these people who are in these vulnerable situations? So there's so many other things to talk about when it comes to TLC. If there's anything else you would like to see, whether it be the MLM, the stuff with the kids, or even the vulnerable people thing, 90-day fiance video too, with all the problematic people on there, let me know down in the comments. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much. Comment MVP below so that I know that you are a channel MVP. And if you want to follow me on social media, all of that and everything you could possibly need is linked down below, including my main channel where I talk about TV shows and LGBTQ stuff. Thank you again, and as always, make sure to stay safe, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.